Good morning. We are setting this up. Make sure we're live on Facebook. All right, so today, for this mastermind call, it's just me. We actually have our live in-person event happening right now. So there's about 50 Sisu teams here at our office. Brian's over there. We did an awesome presentation and mastermind call yesterday morning. So it's really good to meet a lot of you in person. We will be doing another of these events very likely in the winter. So we'll coordinate on that. If you have interest in coming out here, it'll be during ski season. So really good skiing, snowboarding. I would love to get out on the slopes with some of you, but likely putting something like that together in the winter. If you're interested in that, shoot me a message. A lot of you have my email, or you can private message me here on Facebook. But what we wanted to go over today was actually bringing a little bit of yesterday's event to you here on Facebook. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we can dig into that. So what we talked about kind of when we kicked off our mastermind yesterday was this idea that there are 5 levels of Sisu Mastery. And a lot of you might be familiar with Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. So this is it's a psychology concept back in the 40s. There's a psychologist that came up with this idea that there are certain levels of human needs and advancement. And I'm curious if any of you are familiar with this concept, drop it in the chat. But if you know what the base level of Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs is, let me know. I'm going to go ahead and share this, and we can just kind of dig into this idea of, Sisu as a system is very complex. There's a lot to it, and it can really be transformational to your business. So sometimes it's hard to know, like, where do I get started, right? What's the best focus of my time and effort right now? So bringing in this idea of Maslow's hierarchy, at the very base level are your physiological needs, right? So it's really hard to think about your friends and your family or becoming the best that you can be if you're worried about the physiological needs, meaning water, air, shelter, food, right? If you don't have those things, it's really, really hard to get into focusing on some of these top areas. And your time really is better spent building a foundation here so that you can kind of climb this hierarchy and get more out of life. Right. And so we take this same concept over doing thousands and thousands of Sisu implementations to where is your time best spent to making sure you're maximizing what you get out of Sisu. Right. So at the core level, we've got just your basic setup, and we'll go through and do like specific examples of what sits at each of these levels. But at that core level is your basic setup, right? It's hard to focus on anything else, or your time isn't going to be very well spent up in these areas if the basic setup of the system isn't there, right? Going to the next level is really owning the data in the system. Everything in Sisu is based off of data. So if you own that data, you know how it gets into your system and you're able to decipher it, everything else is going to go a lot smoother. You start getting from there into operational efficiency. So you know how data is getting into the system, you know what it means. Now let's talk about automating the way that that data gets into the system. It doesn't make sense to go connect a CRM into Sisu if you don't understand the process of how that data gets into the system. You don't want to automate a process that's not a good process. You just end up making a mess, right? So that's kind of where this operational efficiency comes in. Automation, delegation, task list, the transaction management, auto emails, all that stuff in Sisu, that's kind of third level. Now, my personal favorite is you start getting into levels 2 and the top level, which is leadership. But right here is scaling and what we call the 30% effect. So the 30% effect, I'm sure if you think about a metric that you care about in your business, take something like appointments. If you as a leader focused on appointments every single day and just had this emphasis and this focus on appointments, knowing that that's a metric that's going to drive your business forward, that metric would absolutely improve, right? Now think about if every single one of the agents and every single one of your admin staff shared that same focus with you, right? That attention and that energy towards one metric is absolutely going to create an improvement in that metric, right? And so this second level here is where you start to create that 30% effect. We say that, and we've seen this over and over, by putting up a simple like monitor in your office with a leaderboard on it that shows a metric like appointments that's always accurate and always updated in real time, you will absolutely see a 30% bump in that activity, right? And then leadership and the 107% effect. So this is based on a study that we ran with some of our top teams where we took their prior data from spreadsheets, compared it to data that they had tracked in Sisu after 12 months. So we're comparing 12 months of spreadsheet data and 12 months of Sisu data. And we found about 107% increase in that team's production. The agents on that team were growing at 30%. The team itself was growing at 107%, right? So what do you chalk that up to? The agents growing at 30 and the team growing at 107. It's that team's ability to lead agents to change their business and bring in agents from outside. That's where that difference is coming, the 30 versus the 111. That extra 77% is coming because you can bring agents into your business, plug them into your systems, tell them exactly what they need to do to grow and to improve. You're attracting those agents to your business, and that's why you're seeing that insane growth, that 107% growth, right? So think about your Sisu implementation this way of, if you're up here focusing on CRM integration or something like that, and you're not solid down here of just owning that data and the processes around that data, maybe your time is better spent down here or in the basic setup, right? And vice versa. If you've mastered this operational efficiency, maybe you should be trying to get into these higher levels of really driving leadership and that accountability effect, that 30% effect, right? So if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll be checking the Facebook thread after this as well to make sure we get to any questions. But your basic setup is, have you added your users? Have you added your users? Have you determined which activities you're going to track? And have you set up your intake forms with the right fields, right? So basically adding people to the system, making sure if you go to admin, team settings, activities, what are the leading indicators you want to track, like conversations and appointments? And then on your intake forms, what do we want to track about our transactions, right, in our pipeline? Do we want to track lead source? Do we want to track the mortgage company? And so setting up kind of that basis of data of like, what do we want to track on our transactions and which activities do we want to focus on? I would also add goal setup in here as well. Owning your data. So having a standard operating procedure and SOP for how data gets into Sisu, right? So when is it going to come over? Who's going to enter it? Who owns it? How do you hold them accountable to that, right? And I'll talk about 5 SOPs that every Sisu team should have around their data. But when you look at a dashboard, you should know exactly where that data is coming from. So if anything looks off, you're able to quickly inspect it and know the procedure there and know where things might have gone wrong for getting data into the system, right? That flows into your conversion ratios here, right? So how are you tracking those conversion ratios? Are you able to decipher them? Are you able to pull insights out of the data? That's very important at this second level. Commission plans, right? So have you set up, and this kind of goes along with that basic setup of tracking your transactions, but have you set up your commission plan so that you can track your profitability in Sisu? Very important. You can't run a lot of profitability reports if your commissions aren't in Sisu. And then just basic understanding of like filtering the dashboard, right? Do you know what the different scopes are? Do you know what the different dates mean and how to modify those date range, right? This is kind of the basics of really owning that data in Sisu, because that's going to be the basis for everything else that the platform's doing for you. These are the 5 SOPs, the 5 standard operating procedures that every single Sisu user should have, right? You should have a standard operating procedure around when an appointment gets set. You should have a standard operating procedure around when an appointment gets met, right? Does the agent go and update it in the CRM and then that flows into Sisu? Do they fill out a form in Sisu when they held the appointment, right? And similar for listing signed, a contract that goes, a contract you see, that signed offer agreement going under contract on the property, and then at closing, right? What happens after closing to make sure all your data is accurate, right? So at each of these SOPs, An ISA might be involved, an agent might be involved, a VA might be involved, or an admin might be involved, right? But what's important is that those roles are clearly defined. Everybody knows what their part is, so they can go out and execute on it, and you can hold them accountable to it. All right, this is where things start to get fun. When you have that basis of the basic setup and you own that data, you know what the data is in Sisu, even if it's manually going into Sisu, you can start to make this process more efficient, right? You start thinking about what else can I automate? What else can I integrate, right? How can I cut out duplicate entry? What systems can I replace with Sisu, right? And that really puts you in a good spot. You start talking about building your task list, actually running your business, your transactions out of Sisu. It's very powerful for that. Your email alerts and notifications can be part of those task lists where at certain points in the process, because you have these rock solid processes, auto alert emails are going out. That's cutting out a lot of time. It's creating that operational efficiency for your team. So you're starting to get a lot of the benefits of using Sisu, right? This is why a lot of our teams are able to shrink down their admin staff or empower their admin staff to go focus on things that are going to drive the business forward, right? Okay, so scaling, this is where I get really excited. We call this the 30% effect. This is where Sisu starts to form that heartbeat for your organization, right? So we talked earlier about that idea of if you picked one metric and you focused on it every single day and you had your team focused on it every single day, do you think that metric would grow? It absolutely would. It would grow at least 30%, right? So you're putting bullet point one, you're putting this data on monitors around your office so that it's creating that heartbeat. Those metrics that matter are seen over and over and over again, right? You're honing in on 3 to 4 reports. So you as a leader, you know, maybe your profitability report, your lead source ROI reporting, right? Your forecasting, that's all super dialed in. I think we all have a report or like a stock maybe, or maybe you look at your Apple Watch metrics and you look at those numbers every single day and they improve because it's creating that heartbeat and that consistency and that routine around the numbers that matter, right? So a lot of fun stuff here. Your agents you're not showing the numbers to your agents. They're starting to pull up the Sisu reports and they're walking you through their numbers. They're holding themselves accountable to you. They start to learn how to coach themselves. You're creating contests, point systems. This is, 30% increase when you start doing these things is very conservative, right? I would estimate that a lot of these metrics, conversations, appointments, dials, those could be doubled by doing this type of stuff, right? Because this is very powerful and it creates that culture of accountability and consistency and achievement. So this is cool. This is even cooler. Once you've kind of have that base of that, that 30% effect, that heartbeat for your organization, you start to drive leadership with these numbers and with this data and with these processes. And what I mean by that is agents who would fail, most agents, kind of break this down. Most agents in the business are out of business in 2 years, right? There's a very high percentage of agents who don't last more than 2 years. But on your team, they're growing their business 30% year over year, and they're achieving that, right? That's your average. You've got agents that are doubling their business, right? And that's powerful in an industry where most agents fail, and on your team, they're crushing it. That's where you start to attract agents to your team, right? Your recruiting efforts are downhill now. They're super easy, right? Because people are just coming to you. You can even be selective about who you let join your team, right? And that's because you have that leadership effect. You can take an agent, reverse engineer those numbers to tell them, hey, this is your desired lifestyle. This is what you need to do. And here's our system for holding you accountable to it. If you plug in and trust the process, you're going to be successful. And they do it and they win, right? So you have this a lot of times as a leader, you know all of the numbers, but for you to be able to create that clarity for an agent to just go out and execute, that's leadership, right? So you have deep understanding of these numbers. Agents have deep understanding of maybe a simpler, clarified version of your vision, your fuller understanding of the numbers. You're attracting agents. And I think the biggest thing here is this last bullet point, which is every decision you make is data driven, right? Because you can pull a report in 30 seconds. Think if the reports that you run your business on, say it takes your admin team a couple hours to run those reports. So you're maybe running them once a month, once a quarter, right? Because there's a lot of work going into building those reports. That means that you're using those reports to course correct every 3 months or every month, right? So you let a month go by, you pull the reports and look at them and you course correct a little bit, right? And that speaks a lot. That ability to course correct, that's your vision as a leader. That's what gives you the capacity and the permission to lead your team, right? So think about, rather than maybe course correcting based on data every week or every month, you're doing it every single day, right? Your vision and your direction and your clarity as a leader is going to be so much stronger. And that's because you can run these data intensive reports. You can run them in 30 seconds. You can course correct every single day, right? And you're going to stay on track with your vision so much better as a leader. And that's really where you're creating that leadership effect. So I know a lot of you are here in person, heard that yesterday, but we wanted to share it here on Facebook. I'm just going to make sure if we have any comments here, I get to them. So it looks like we're good for now. If any of you have questions about this, or if you're watching this after the recording, you want me to send you a copy of those slides, happy to do that. If you're interested in coming out here to Sisu, to our headquarters, I'm actually here right now. So we got a really nice, awesome space that we can meet up and do a little mastermind, kind of like this, talk about some of the new things coming out in Sisu. Go hit the slopes if you're into that. That'd be really cool. So message me on Facebook, shoot me an email, double check if we don't have any questions. Cool. So thanks for joining. Thanks for watching this if you're watching it after recorded, and we'll see you all next week.